Discovery: Henry's body hidden under boards, and Atkinson's body found nearby, tied to a tree. Police found the couple with their throats slashed.
Well, District Attorney Sean Tier says that while Parrot's cause of death is still under review right now, it appears that he took his own life.
This isn't over. We're not giving up on finding every single victim that he victimized, but that's true for all of the families out there that are still looking for answers.
It was supposed to be a normal Friday night. Two young people, a 22-year-old woman named Cheryl Henry and her boyfriend, 21-year-old Andy Atkinson, had spent the evening out dancing in West Houston. They were young. They were happy. They were exactly where they were supposed to be. By the time anyone thought to look for them, it was already too late. What a security guard discovered in the early hours of August 23, 1990, in a quiet, secluded corner of West Houston, would become one of the most haunting cold cases in the city's history. And for 36 years, nobody knew. If you are new here, welcome. This is Gravitas Crime, where we dig deep into cold cases, unsolved mysteries, and the stories that refuse to stay buried. Today's case is one that gripped the city of Houston for nearly 4 decades. It has everything: a young couple on a date night, a brutal and almost unimaginably violent crime scene, decades of dead ends, a DNA breakthrough, a 36-year cold case finally solved. And then, just when justice seemed within reach, a twist that nobody saw coming. We are going to cover all of it, top to bottom. No detail left out. Before we talk about what happened to Cheryl Henry and Andy Atkinson, I want to take a moment to talk about who they were. Because in true crime, it's really easy to reduce victims to their case, to a crime scene photo, to a headline. And Cheryl and Andy deserve more than that. Cheryl Henry was 22 years old in the summer of 1990. By all accounts, she was warm, full of life. Someone who, according to her younger sister Shane Craig, brought, quote, much love and light to everyone around her. She was a daughter, a friend, a sister. And on that Friday night in August, she was just a young woman enjoying her life. Andy, whose full name was Garland Andrew Atkinson, was 21 years old. He went by Andy to everyone who knew him. The two of them had been out dancing that evening at a club in West Houston. It was a night out. Nothing special, nothing unusual. Just two young people doing what young people do. At some point during the evening, they ended up parked together in a secluded area, a cul-de-sac off Enclave Parkway in West Houston. This area was locally known as Lover's Lane, a quiet, secluded spot that young couples in Houston knew about. And on most nights, that's all it was. Quiet, private, safe. But on the night of August 23, 1990, it was anything but. Nobody knows exactly what time Cheryl and Andy arrived at that spot. Nobody knows how long they had been there. What we do know is what happened next.
It was a security guard on a routine patrol. Nothing unusual about the night. Just doing his rounds, checking the area, making sure everything was as it should be. And then he noticed something. A vehicle, parked in that secluded cul-de-sac off Enclave Parkway. It hadn't moved, not for a while. The guard approached the car, and when he looked inside, he found a woman, unresponsive. He immediately called police. When officers arrived, they began to search the surrounding area, and what they found nearby would shock even the most seasoned investigators. About 100 yards away from the car, near a tree, they found a young man. He was bound, tied to the tree. And his throat? His throat had been slashed so deeply that he was, and I want to be direct with you here, he was nearly decapitated. The young man was Andy Atkinson, and the woman in the car, found unresponsive, also with fatal injuries to her neck, was Cheryl Henry.
Hidden under boards, and Atkinson's body found nearby, tied to a tree. Police found the couple with their throats slashed. The case went cold for days.
She had also been sexually assaulted. She had been left under a pile of debris. Two young people who had gone out dancing that Friday night. Neither of them would ever come home. Investigators immediately recognized this was not a random act of rage. The level of violence, the binding of the male victim, the sexual assault of the female victim. This was calculated. This was controlled. Whoever did this had done something like this before, or was capable of doing it again. And so began what would become one of Houston's longest, most heartbreaking, and most frustrating cold cases. In the days and weeks after the murders, Houston police worked around the clock. They had a crime scene. They had physical evidence. They had the sheer horror of what had happened to two young people to drive them forward. What they didn't have. Investigators would eventually interview and examine more than 100 persons of interest over the years. 100 people. Followed. Questioned. Cleared or filed away. And not one of them turned out to be the killer. The case became locally infamous. Houstonians who grew up in the city in the 90s and 2000s knew about the Lovers Lane murders. It was the kind of case that stayed with a community. The kind of case that parents whispered about. That made young couples think twice about where they parked. Then in 2008, nearly 18 years after the murders, investigators caught what they thought might be their first real break. DNA evidence recovered from the crime scene in 1990, held all those years, was matched. Not to the Lovers Lane murders directly, but to a separate rape case. Think about what that means for a moment. It meant that whoever killed Cheryl and Andy had struck again. Or had struck before. It meant there was a serial offender out there, connected by DNA to at least 2 crimes. And it meant there was now a biological link to follow. But here's the devastating part. Despite having that DNA link, despite knowing the same man was responsible for multiple crimes, investigators still could not name a suspect. The DNA didn't match anyone in the national database at the time. The lead went cold again. Now, I need you to stay with me here. Because everything I've just told you, the crime scene, the 36 years, the DNA that led nowhere, that is all set up. Because what happens next, in 2025, and then again just days ago in 2026, changes everything. I want to take a moment and talk about one man. Retired HPD Sergeant Billy Belk.
This isn't over. We're not giving up on finding every single victim that he victimized. But that's true for all of the families out there that are still looking for answers.
Sergeant Belk worked this case for 17 years. 17 years of following leads, of interviewing people, of calling the Henry family and the Atkinson family, and having to tell them year after year that there was nothing new. 17 years before he retired from the force. And even in retirement, even after he walked out of the Houston Police Department for the last time, he never stopped thinking about Cheryl and Andy. He told Cheryl's younger sister Shane directly, and I'm going to quote him here, Shane, I kept telling you, this case will clear. I know it's hard to have patience after 36 years, but we have DNA. Back in 1990, it was an exciting new technology. 36 years of patience. From a retired detective. From a grieving family. That is what this case asked of people. In 2025, 35 years after the murders, the case was quietly revisited. Investigators went back to the file. Back to the evidence. Back to the DNA. And then, a tip came in. Someone reached out, and they named a name. Floyd William Parrot. Now here is something that stunned investigators. Despite more than 100 persons of interest examined over 36 years, Floyd Parrot had never once been questioned in connection with this case. He had never appeared on their radar. Not once in 3.5 decades. But once his name came in, investigators went to work fast. The tip was combined with renewed DNA analysis, using modern forensic techniques that didn't exist in 1990 or even in 2008, and it matched. Floyd William Parrot's DNA was a match to the crime scene evidence from the Lovers Lane murders. 36 years later, science had caught up with a killer. But here's where the story gets even darker. Because when investigators started digging into Floyd Parrot's background, what they found painted the picture of a man who had been hiding in plain sight for decades. Floyd William Parrot was 28 years old in August of 1990, the same year Cheryl and Andy were murdered, and he was already known to law enforcement for something that, in hindsight, is deeply chilling. Floyd Parrot was a serial police impersonator.
In 1988, records show Floyd William Parrot pretended he was a sergeant with the Department of Defense and was driving a car displaying emergency equipment. Parrot received 1-year probation, violated the terms, and got 9 months in jail. Then in July 1990, just 5 weeks before the Lovers Lane murders, he was arrested on 2 counts of impersonating a cop, claiming he was a deputy constable for Precinct 4 and Precinct 5. Parrot made bond and was back out on the street. And exactly 1 week after the Lovers Lane murders, he pleaded guilty in that case and got a 2-year prison sentence. The pattern continued in 1996. Parrot, in a car with emergency lights, pulled over a driver for supposed expired plates and demanded $100 cash to let him go. Searches of Parrot's car and home later turned up numerous police-related items, including counterfeit IDs and badges for several law enforcement agencies. Parrot was sentenced to 20 years in that case, but was released on parole after serving about 3 years' time. The big question for investigators at their upcoming news conference is, do they believe Parrot was pretending to be a cop when he approached the young couple in West Houston on so-called Lovers Lane?
He was charged with impersonating a public servant in 1988, 2 years before the murders. Then again in 1989, 1 year before. And again in 1996, 6 years after. He was eventually convicted on the 1996 charge. He served 3 years of a 20-year sentence and was released on parole in 1999. On March 25, 2026, an FBI SWAT team converged on an apartment in Lincoln, Nebraska. Inside, Floyd William Parrot, 64 years old, arrested, taken into custody.
In Nebraska and charged with capital murder.
Our sister was taken from our family in a way that no one should ever experience.
It was a huge shock. But we're all slowly trying to understand everything.
The family say they don't know him, and he claimed he didn't know the victims either after being arrested. But records show DNA found at that murder scene matched DNA from a 1996 sexual assault case that didn't result in Parrot's conviction. A newly assigned detective recently submitted it to a national database after reviewing a tip pointing to Parrot as the possible perpetrator.
We had DNA, and back in 1990, that was an exciting new technology.
Retired homicide detective John Belk always thought that would lead to answers in the case.
Again, and never get caught. So I figured he was dead. So I'm very happy to know he's alive and will be held accountable for his actions.
4 weeks after Floyd Parrot's arrest, one day before he was scheduled to appear at his extradition hearing, the hearing that would have sent him back to Houston to stand trial, Floyd William Parrot was found dead in his cell at the Lancaster County Department of Corrections in Nebraska. Authorities believe he took his own
Also
life.
this evening, the suspect in the Lovers Lane cold case murders has died.
Floyd Parrot was found dead inside a Nebraska jail. This happened just a month after he was arrested. The gruesome killings of Cheryl Henry and Andy Atkinson have haunted Houstonians for decades.
Harris County District Attorney Sean Tier tells me it appears Floyd Parrot took his own life just days before he could be brought back to Houston.
We weren't able to really get the full measure of justice that this defendant so richly deserved.
Parrot was arrested last month, accused of killing 22-year-old Cheryl Henry and 21-year-old Andy Atkinson in August 1990. According to court records, the couple was found dead in West Harris County, both with severe injuries to their necks. The case remained unsolved for nearly 36 years until DNA evidence and arrest records tied Parrot to the crimes, leading to
The capital murder charge against the man DNA evidence linked to the deaths of Cheryl Henry and Andy Atkinson would be dismissed. There will be no trial. There will be no verdict read aloud in a courtroom. No handcuffs clicked shut in front of the families he destroyed. Cheryl Henry was 22 years old. Andy Atkinson was 21. They went dancing on a Friday night in August of 1990, and they deserved to come home. The man accused of taking their lives chose to end his own, rather than face the justice they deserved. Whether that is a coward's ending or some strange form of closure, I'll leave that for you to decide in the comments. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you. Genuinely. These stories are heavy. They ask something of you to sit with them. If this case moved you, or if you have any connection to Houston and remember when this happened, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. And if you have any information about crimes that could be connected to Floyd William Parrot, authorities have asked the public to reach out to the Harris County DA's Cold Case Division at 713-274-5640. If you're new here, I'd really appreciate you hitting subscribe. It's free, it helps this channel more than you know, and I promise every case I cover gets the same level of care and depth, even more than this one. There's a playlist below with more cold cases and unsolved mysteries. Check it out when you're done here. I'll see you on the next one. Take care of yourselves.